Cool. So I try to throw some artwork. I'm an uncultured heathen myself, so I try to throw some artwork into my presentations for people. So I'm going to tell you a lot of stuff. There is an unbelievable amount of things that go into how to kind of put a career together. One quick thing I actually want to see. Could you guys throw in the chat real quick? How many of you are any? Can I get any any sense, Alex, of the breakdown here? Is it mostly ECE or is it mostly CS? Is it like 50-50?
I would want to say that it's probably mostly electricals, but there's a fair amount of CPs, and then we do also have uh, some people from other majors as well.
Cool. Okay, good news. I'm the enemy. I'm a computer scientist. The only the only field with the word science in it that's actually serious. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about I guess how software engineers at least tend to structure their career hunt and what they'll do to kind of build out a personal brand and a professional one. There's a lot that I'm going to try to tell you guys about, and I promise it's really good advice. So I'll start with a little bit about me. Um, so I'm from Rutgers. I went there originally for musical theater in 2016. I switched from musical theater to a double in computer science and physics. I worked for a couple people, maybe you've heard of. I worked in college for MailChimp, Code Academy, Major League Hacking. I did that for a while. My first job out of college was at Tumblr. I did that for about 6 months, and then I left to start a nonprofit with some friends of mine. So for the next 2.5 years or so, I started giving out McChickens and water off the hood of my Nissan in New Brunswick. It turns out, though, that nonprofit is a literal term, so I had to get a job. I got a job writing telecom software in Java for a company in Somerset, New Jersey. I did that while doing my master's at Georgia Tech, the OMSCS program. If you've heard of it, it's fantastic. So I did that for the next about 2.5 years. I ended up at the end of 2019 as a TA for grad cybersecurity and doing some part-time work at a venture fund sourcing deals for the VC community. At the start of 2020, I started law school after finishing my master's, and I became a full-time developer evangelist for an open source blockchain company in New York called R3. So what else do I do? I also am mentoring some startups out of Egypt. If it wasn't obvious, I'm Middle Eastern. So uh, some of the other things that I get to do, I also am a part of IEEE USA, which is really fun. So I get to do a little bit of technology policy advising. Some of that is just through friends of friends and getting to work on a couple of congressional campaigns in this past cycle. I'm currently doing some stuff with consumer protection and data privacy with New York State Senator Thomas. Sorry, the it's been a long day. So there's so much I guess that I want to try to convey all at once, because if you just heard all of that, I mean, my resume is kind of like a piñata threw up. So that being said, I'm going to just kind of try to jump into the three. I'm going to start with three high-level bullet points on what general themes you're going to want to focus on for how to build a personal brand and how to structure how you think about yourself and your career. With those three principles, I'm going to kind of dive into a bunch of really specific stuff. I have a really analytical way, I think, of looking at my life. I think very few people do, and more should. And what better group to take advantage of that than you guys? And by all means, if any of you have questions or you want to stop me in the middle or something like that, feel free. Uh, and hopefully there will still be time for questions. And yeah, that's interesting. I don't know how my Twitter handle got there in the bottom right, but you guys should use that. Not sure how that happens. Anyway, okay, so what's in it for you? I'm going to tell you exactly the steps that I follow for how to properly position yourself, and you are more than welcome to go to any of the links that I refer you to and insult me publicly for them. So you can completely reach out to me if there's someone you need an introduction to or something like that after this. You're more than welcome to kind of tweet at me and or reach out to me on Twitter or whatever, and I'll help you find whoever you're trying to talk to, which is cool. If you're trying to start a company, for you guys seem like you're pretty sharp. So if any of you are actually looking to get introductions to VCs or you're looking to get feedback on a pitch deck or something like that, you are more than welcome to reach out to me anytime. Again, many VCs are blowhards. I cannot guarantee you I will not be, but I can try to at least tell you what they might say. So you're more than welcome to reach out to me on any of these things. I have no pride or shame. I left all that behind in 2007 with Britney Spears and Pokemon. So I want to just kind of put all that out there. I'm not here to give you guys pretense and nonsense. So I'll jump into my actual advice. So I have my little corny title here as the objective being to become a journeyman, the classic title for someone who's greater than an apprentice, but not a master, maybe you could say. So how do you set yourself apart? There's a couple things. The basics, just to go back to the roots from Warren Buffett and Naval Ravikant. If you don't know those names, you should definitely look them up. The basic advice is to have very high energy, high intellect, and high integrity. You could ignore all of the advice I'm about to give you if you focus on those three principles. They seem very basic, but they are truly core to everything you will do for the rest of your career. And every single person I've met that is either extremely wealthy or extremely successful has these three qualities in spades, and they have exceptional behavior. So try to keep that in mind as a kind of underlying theme here. So the first thing you're going to want to think about is projects, right? I saw some really cool things about research with accessibility, and I saw the really cool. I'm forgetting the term for it, but the sculpture work with the light. What was that called, Alex? Those cubes in that image that I think it was.
The 3D LED cubes?
Yes, those. That's really great. Those kinds of projects are great because you're going to want to put those all over your resume. And I'll show you my resume in a little bit to give you literal examples. But you're going to want to have, especially if you're someone who's not going to college, it doesn't apply to you guys, but still, most of the time, what we're finding in the venture world is that college degrees aren't very good indicators of who is capable of taking independent action and really going out on their own and building things for themselves, especially just the notion of being able to take initiative and really go build something. So building 2 or 3 projects, I would say, is ideal, but quantity is not better than quality. So you're best off either building something you think is really cool or building something that is just really interesting to you, right? You'll do the best job on those kinds of projects and you'll have the most success with them as far as your resume, because if you're actually interested in those projects, you'll be excited to talk about them in interviews. For example, after this, I can tell you about how it's legal to build nuclear reactors. When I found that out, that was just $800 I didn't have anymore. But now, to be clear, fusion, not fission. Fusion reactors, legal. Fission, not. Good note to make. So generally, try to build some projects that you actually think are really interesting. The best project solves a problem you care about. It does not have to be perfect. It's about taking the initiative and laying that out on your resume as far as the skills you've gotten some direct exposure to. That'll really take you pretty far. So the literal steps here, go find some hackathons. To be honest, online hackathons are just not fun. I wish they were, but I don't really think they are. But your best bet is going to be to go to hackathons and build the things that you think are interesting. Your second thing is going to be to try to build a personal website, contribute to open source projects. The best way to find what things you want to work on is to solve software problems that annoy you. So for example, if you use a Chrome extension that you think is ridiculous for its UI choices, you should not go and complain at them directly. They will not like that, but they will like it if you at least attempt to submit a pull request. I don't know how much you guys have used GitHub and kind of the cloud hosted software and version control management services, but Git is always going to be a good Git is always going to be a good skill to have and resume booster, especially if you're EE. So let me show you some examples of these two things just to break this out. So if you go on davidawad.com, shameless plug, this is the first one I'm going to refer you to. You'll notice a couple things. I want to point you first at the resume piece because this is what we were first talking about. So there's a lot that goes into the resume, and I could go on about this for a really long time, but try to just think carefully about leaving these big bullets for what your key achievements are. Try to keep things short and sweet. And when it comes to the projects and technical proficiencies, this has been very successful for me as far as leaving that right on top. Most recruiters tend to only care about really 2 or 3 things. Where are you? Literally, am I going to have to pay for you to move somewhere? And do you know the skills that I'm looking for? Depending on what kinds of companies you're looking for, most recruiters don't understand engineering skill sets anyway. So they're basically doing pattern matching for terms that they think are what they're looking for. That being said, as far as the projects, so I like to list my projects out like this. If you're going to list a project on a resume, it doesn't have to be something that runs on the internet. It's more than fine to have hardware projects. I think what you want to focus on is just, here's my project, here's what it is, or rather, here's what it is, here's what I used to do it. Meaning, I built something cool, and here are the skills that I used to learn it. So for example, here, right, I used React, I used Node, JavaScript, whatever, and I used Heroku to launch it. And so that's where this project lives. If you want to find more, you can go and just click it. Make sure that your resume has hyperlinks as well. Make sure all of these hyperlinks work. It's a very easy way. It's a very easy way to just get engagement with respect to your resume. If you really want to go further, you can also put bit.ly links. If you want to use analytics on how people actually interact with your resume, you can put individual bit.ly links for every hyperlink on your resume. But I have a life, so I don't do that. But it could be cool. I know some people who are much more intense about that kind of thing, and it's really nice. It's almost like you're hacking together a version of DocSend, if you're familiar with that product. A lot of founders like to use that product to see how are VCs looking at their pitch decks or PDFs that they're sharing out. So feel free to look at the resume and take whatever inspiration from it you will. And yeah, I don't want to stick on that for too long, but those are the basics. Some other notes I want to make actually on the personal site is set up HTTPS. It's just a nice one. The personal site is good for a lot of different reasons. The first is that it proves that you at some basic level know what you're doing. The second is that you can set this up for free, so it doesn't really cost you anything, and it only helps your case. Your personal website doesn't have to be particularly complicated. It doesn't have to be a blog, but it should be able to convey at the very least that you're able to put together some kind of professional front. I don't think it would take you very long to find personal websites that look bad, but a bad looking personal website is worse than not having one, in my humble opinion. So just be aware of that. I think it can help a lot. Another thing that I'm going to get into that will kind of coincide with this is the branding. And so I'll jump back to this because that is our second high level theme. Holy segues, Batman. So one of the things, it's so overlooked how to think about your personal branding. In many cases, the presentation reflects the quality of the work. If you've ever looked for an online banking account, you've probably thought this, right? Simple Bank was the love of my life until it closed recently because of an acquisition by PNC, and there just is not a good online bank. And you can read plenty of online Reddit threads about people complaining that they can't go and use and they can't find a good alternative. And so a lot of people are super upset about this. So the presentation reflects the quality of the work. So my point here is set up a style guide for yourself and use it. One of the things you might have already noticed just looking at these slides is these slides look very similar to the website I just showed you. So if we look back, and I'm going to jump, that's unfortunate that that was revealed to you already. But if you look at the site's got the same exact color scheme and font choices as the slides, right? And as the resume. This is actually a very important note because you will kind of present a consistent professional front to anyone you're actually in contact with if you're doing things like setting up a personal letterhead, or you want to just make sure that you have some kind of consistent way to interact with your, in this case, you don't have customers, you're not startups, but the people who you wish to convince that you can provide value. This is the direction you want to take it, right? You want to have consistency and professionalism and a little bit of style, but not too much. So I have a little style guide example here. My personal brand style guide. You may think this is a little overboard. It doesn't take long to put one together, but if you've never done graphic design before, this is a brand style guide. It's pretty straightforward. It identifies the logo. It kind of outlines some of the logic and the philosophy behind a particular brand. So I have a bunch of writing here and some nonsense on this, and I outline the concepts and colors. The thing that's probably going to be most interesting to you is this page, where you see that the fonts and the colors are outlined in hexadecimal. The header 1s through header 6s are also defined, as well as what to do with things like body text in inline links. So if this seems interesting to you, you may want to make a copy of it of some kind. Let me make sure you guys are able to see this. Great, you can. So I'm going to throw this in the chat as well. Hopefully you'll find some use for that. I think once you put together a personal brand style guide for yourself, I think that may add some kind of personal pride, if you will. So that's been a really nice source of professionalism, I would say. A lot of people have come at me with a different tune because of those kinds of little things. So to jump back on the branding piece, again, very unfortunate that I blew that early, but that is okay. The next thing I wanted to point out, use an email signature and use email tracking. So set up an email signature that looks nice. Get rid of the sent from my iPhone. I cannot tell you how many founders have sent me. I've gotten the sent from my iPhone thing, and it just is not a good look. I know some old school investors that frankly make worse decisions. But if you haven't, it's unfortunate that this is the case, but some investors just won't be interested in a company if the founders are doing the sent from my iPhone thing. Even though we know probably that you are sending your emails from an iPhone, it's just not a great look. So those kinds of little things, try to remove them, patch up an email signature that looks kind of good, something you like, not too big. Don't have some hyperinflated title. I'm not personally a big fan of that either. The signal to noise ratio can get a little ridiculous there. Use email tracking. I like to use mailtrack.io. I'll stick the link to that in the chat. Mailtrack.io is really nice. You get read receipts for any of your emails. If you're curious how it works, it embeds a single little image tag of a 1x1 pixel white image. And what Mailtrack is doing is they're generating these different IDs for the pixels, serving them up, and then they track the requests because the emails are actually HTML. So they track the image requests for the pixels, which is how they can do email tracking for pretty much any platform. It's like $60 a year, so maybe that won't make sense for all of you, but something to know about for the future. Use a branded email. So for example, I own davidawad.com. My email is me@davidawad.com. I'm actually in the process of getting the domain davidaw.ad. It's a funny story with that because the country of Andorra is very, very specific about who can get a domain, and you have to get a foreign patent and a whole thing. I have an Andorran lawyer who's like getting me this trademark. It's a pain in the butt, but it's really hip. It's a very modern trend if you really want to stick out. And this is me maybe justifying the ridiculous amount of money I've spent on the country of Andorra to get this email. But I will say that someone might stick out more if you have that branded email. davidaw.ad is kind of an interesting one. You don't hear the .ad TLD very often, but more importantly, you can get a lot of different branded emails. Top level domains are available all over the place. For example, actually, never mind. I won't mention that one. But if you'd like a funny example of a custom domain, I have plenty, but I can't share those here, at least not while Ruth, who's from IEEE National, is here. But I have some goofy custom domains. So one other one I want to mention, you learn to use GPG. Learn to use GPG for email and learn to use it to verify your commits on GitHub. I think that's a nice +1 to have as well. You can get that figured out in a couple hours, and it's a nice one to know, especially if you ever get into the space where you need to actually encrypt your emails to communicate with someone. If you've ever been on the darknet or you communicate with political dissidents or things like that, a good friend of mine translates books into Arabic and then distributes them throughout the Middle East. So he tends to need to use GPG, and sometimes that's the only way you can communicate. So it's important to at least know how that works, and it's a nice little +1 on the professionalism side. Again, just to get back to this this notion here of that public key, having that on the site is nice for people being able to send you those GPG emails. So people will kind of know you know what's up, if you will. So that's pretty much it. There's one last one that I think is kind of cool that very few people think about. When you actually set up caller ID, there's a database shared between all the carriers called CNAME or OpenCNAME. So you should check that your caller ID is actually set. That can help you once in a blue moon if you're trying to talk to a recruiter or something like that. So you can go online, make sure your OpenCNAME value is set properly. You may just need to yell at your phone carrier to get this set up correctly, but that's another nice one to do. Yeah, so if you do all of those things, you will be cool. There we go. Honestly, the payoff there wasn't worth it. It would have been had you guys not seen that 3 times now, but that's all right. So we've outlined this second pillar. We've kind of broken down the literal steps, right? Right after this is over, write the style guide for yourself, buy a domain name with your name, use it on your site, make the make the custom email and learn to use GPG, and set up the personal site. Make sure the branding is consistent on them, and you'll have a really solid setup as far as how people, when they interact with you the first time, are going to be able to get a sense of what you're all about. Our third pillar, before I jump into it, I want to take questions for. If anyone's got something, you can feel free to just speak. I guess there's 35 of you, so we'll see if that turns out to be a problem. But yeah, feel free to post in the chat if anyone has questions or something like that. I'm gonna take a quick sip of water, and if no one has anything, I'll keep going.
I saw that you had a 2-page resume. What are your thoughts on that?
I cannot tell you the number of people who have gotten in fights with me over the length of my resume. It is incredible. I think that if someone cares more about the length of your resume than they do about what you're capable of, they're probably not going to be a good person to work for anyway.
That's a
But
good point.
it depends. If you're playing it conservatively, some recruiters who are not actually, I think some recruiters put an overemphasis on what I would call pretense that doesn't have much value. I think this would kind of fall into that category where someone who's not the person you'd be working for, that person might say, oh, you have a 2-page resume, so I'm just going to throw this out. Now, again, like, you're probably not going to want to work at those kinds of companies, but to give context, I've gotten to have interviews with Facebook, Google, etc., the FANGs, that kind of space. I've never gotten a ding or even a mention of the fact that it's 2 pages. One thing worth mentioning as well, I guess, like, it's front and back, like one sheet of paper. If you're bringing it in person, that's another nice one. If you care about this kind of thing, having linen resume paper and printing your resume out on that and bringing it with you to an interview is kind of a nice one, because once you feel that paper, literally the textile difference will help you stick out to the person that's interviewing you, right? And if you have higher quality paper, you're trying to play every angle you can, right? So if we're going to game human psychology here at UCF, then we're going to win, right? So that's a note worth being aware of, that you can go to these different lengths. And I think even just thinking about every angle you can take is good to do so, just because it'll make you that much more detail oriented and you'll be that much more confident going in. So yeah, Homero, send me a tweet or DM me on Twitter or whatever with your personal website. I'd be happy to give you some feedback on it. That's totally cool with me. Any other questions? Cool.
I had a question actually. I was more curious. How did you deal with like hopping between different industries a lot? Because you said you started out as like a theater major, right?
Yeah. It turns out actors are insufferable. I would consider myself very sufferable, and so I just couldn't do it anymore. I just hit a certain point where I didn't like it. As far as transitioning industries, it wasn't as hard for me because I was in college when I made that choice. So I don't know that I have great insights on this, but generally people who switch industries tend to go that project route that I was describing earlier. Because if you are, let's say you've been doing musical theater for the past 2 years, you're gonna have to throw out your theater resume. Your credits mean nothing. That's not gonna get you through the door at IBM. You're gonna need to go in there and say, hey, like, I've been a working professional for 2 years. I'm looking for something more stable, and here are the projects I've been able to build. I have potential. Give me a shot. Is a much stronger case than just a dude who got a 3.3 from a random 4-year school but majored in computer science. And again, that's where, like, it's two things, right? Like, I don't think many people realize how much your ability to, like, that personal integrity, right? If you have self-respect and you're capable and you can build a couple of personal projects, you probably will get a shot. And you might need to do a little more to get your foot in the door, but you'll have a much better chance of getting hired than the rando with a 3.3 from a 4-year school. Especially now, I would say, in the world of COVID, where so many aspects of the pretense we had in society are now removed, right? There is no parking lot, there is no fancy car. There is no like corner office. Like there's not even a notion of who's taller. Right? We're all the same height because you adjust it yourself. So many of these things go out the window. There's a better shot of that now than there ever was before. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. The emphasis on projects and personal accomplishments is going to be bigger for you, but it's definitely doable.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe one other note to make on that though is perhaps it is going to depend on the industry. There probably is some kind of rough inverse correlation between the amount of regulation in a particular industry and how amenable they would be to someone from a different industry breaking in. So that may be a factor there as well. So for example, if you're trying to do healthcare, you obviously there's a very high barrier to entry to your program, et cetera. If you're trying to
Yeah.
get into finance, you'll have a lower barrier to entry. Maybe someone from CS could break in, but it's that's not unheard of. But I think it's a little harder than say if you were in tech and you were trying to go to, I don't know, ed tech.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like for me, it was more like going to different fields of engineering.
Oh
Because
yeah,
I used to be at ME actually, and then I switched to EE recently.
very cool. Or sorry to hear that, depending on how you feel.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like it more so.
Okay, so I think I've got till 7:30, so I'll keep going here. Interviewing, this stuff's not going to be as relevant to you, so I'll move towards principles, but I'll just break it down really quickly. One of the things you should absolutely do is write out a list of every single company you could possibly want to work for. I'm very surprised that more people don't do this, so I'll show you. For example, I keep a little spreadsheet of where did I put it? There we go. It's not a great super comprehensive list, but to a certain extent you should have an idea of like where's everywhere I could want to work, right? And this is something I was going to emphasize to you guys as well. If I was in EE right now, I would be thinking about these spaces, right? What are the spaces with the most leverage or the most potential for growth in the future? That to me, based on what I'm able to see, is blockchain, venture capital, space tech, self-driving cars, quantum computing, and robotics, right? I leave out AI only because that's kind of very well understood at this point. I actually think that the peak for AI has not exactly happened, but I think there might be better long-term ROI going into some of these other things as more software frameworks for doing machine learning get more proliferated, right? Pretty much anyone now can clone a repo with TensorFlow and just kind of fiddle around with the layers to see if their accuracy is good enough. So that's only going to get easier with time. So I think that Stanford machine learning PhD that might have been worth $1 million now I think will slowly become worth less. But that's me being a little bearish on machine learning. So of course, machine learning is a fantastic career, and obviously you're all more than welcome to go into it. So yeah, so I list out a lot of things in here. I think just taking the time to make a little tracking spreadsheet for yourself on what looks interesting to you, whether that's in venture, like here's all the funds I think are interesting. Here's all the local companies in my neighborhood. Here's a couple of startups that I applied to. Here's a couple of things with AWS, Google, Databricks, Palantir, whatever. And then I have a whole bunch that I should have applied to and didn't end up needing to. So that's a thing that is worth thinking about. I shouldn't have left that one category in there. Sorry about that. So take some time to list out, here's everyone I'm applying to, and I'm going to write out all the names and I'm going to track them every time I apply. It's going to be annoying, but you'll have a much better handle on when was your last touch point with these companies, because you want to manage that relationship somewhat carefully, right? I've been turned down my MongoDB 3 times, no clue why, but every single time they've been happy to have me interview again. So that's a thing to keep in mind. You know, when was the last time I talked to them? Google has that window of you should wait 6 months before applying again if you don't pass Google's tests. So to jump back into this a little bit further, the 3 main tricks, like I described, you're going to want to go and learn. This one doesn't apply as much to you guys, but within the software engineering community, you're going to need to know LeetCode, which is just an online platform for practice programming problems. That's a really good one to be aware of. You know, do a bunch of practice problems on LeetCode, actually do them. It's going to be hard and it sucks, but it'll make you a better programmer, and you'll have fun eventually, allegedly, doing them. So be aware of those things and work on the software you want. The opportunities will come. This one's a little bit of philosophizing on my part, but I really do think that if you if you look at the software and problems that's interesting to you, that will be much more likely to bring you fruitful opportunities, especially because you'll be that much more aware of opportunities in that space. And that too, like another piece of this, even setting aside how good you are at interviewing, much more of the opportunities you guys are looking for in college is about just being diligent and being careful, right? Much more of the work, especially even in engineering or what have you, much more of the problem space is, can you be diligent and self-motivated and self-directed and be accountable to yourself for whatever your goals are? And we can talk a little bit about how you track the things you have to accomplish in your life or what have you. But that I want to stress this general point that just being diligent and being reasonable and over communicating and being very explicit in all of your communication, meaning never like never use pronouns when referring to particular work, being like, okay, I can do that, as opposed to, okay, I will post X on the website. It's more typing, but if you always over communicate, you will never it will always be appreciated. So within the work context, just try to be diligent, over communicate, and keep those things in mind. So that's the interviewing piece. And so some final thoughts, like I said, here's what you can do right after this. Look into that domain, set up a personal website, and that's your first personal project right there. Then think about 2 other possible projects that you could think are interesting. Those don't have to be software. They could be whatever you think are valuable. Then think about the branding, the style guide, design the resume, write some blog posts if you're so inclined, set up GPG, think about the caller ID, branded email address, put the signature on the website. Make sure to have 2FA set up on all of your stuff, right? That's just a general security tip I tell everyone. Then you can go ahead and apply to companies. But what you should do before you apply is you should actually know what your goals are. And this is the next big theme that I'm going to try to drill into you guys, which is if you could apply to all the tech companies in the world, but if you actually turn out to hate programming 5 years down the line, one, there's nothing wrong with starting over. There's a lot of complex economic reasons why people don't start over as programmers, but if you hate programming, you will learn that, and you don't have to go into engineering even after this. For example, I'm currently in law school, and I'm a crazy person, but there's no reason that you couldn't go to law school after this and be a fantastic patent attorney or something else, right? The list goes on, but actually, before you can do any of these things, and maybe the question to ask that you unfortunately don't get the chance to ask because you have to know that you want to do EE really early. Knowing what you actually want in life is one of the hardest challenges you will have as a person in society. So I would take the time to really think about that. If you, for example, know if you had a job that was going to pay you $150,000 a year after graduation, what would be the amount of money you'd have to have before you just didn't work anymore? If you don't know what that number is, you should figure it out. And if you know what that number is, you should know what you would do after you had it. Because presumably, if you had it tomorrow, you would be doing those things instead, right? So what is the thing that you would do even if you didn't have to work on the job or whatever it was? Presumably, the job is a stepping stone to whatever you would do after that. So be aware of that distinction and think about it really, really seriously. You don't have to have the answer and stick to it for life, but you should have an answer and approximate towards it. Ideally, you are, as any individual person, are a point on an axis, right? A multi-dimensional space where the X and Y axis, let's say, could be knowledge and kindness. And maybe the Z axis could be patience. Let's say every person, regardless of who they are, exists as a point on this plane. And there is some point of which you wish to be in your life. Every action you take should reduce the Euclidean distance between you and this point. So you should know what this point is forever. And it can adjust, it can move. That's how points work. But you should know where that is, because that is the North Star in your life, and you should seek it always. Engineering does not matter if it is the opposite direction of the North Star. The last point I want to drive here is, before I get into analytically looking at your goals, is that life which is unexamined is not actually worth living, right? Socrates has this amazing story that Plato writes where he goes in there, Miletus is prosecuting him for corrupting the youth of Athens. And Socrates is just making him look like an idiot, and he's mocking him the whole time. And the Senate is looking at him, and he's like, wow. The senators are like, wow, like, Socrates, why are you even doing this? You don't need to go this far. And Miletus, the prosecutor, is like, look, just apologize, say you were wrong, and we won't prosecute you. And Socrates is like, why? Right? I'm doing them a service. I am making those people's lives better. And I'd rather be dead than to live a life and let others live a life unexamined. And that's really, really important here as well, especially because the decisions you make now will impact the rest of your life. Easy choices that you make now will severely decrease the acceleration of your success and wealth in the future. Easier put, hard choices, easy life. Easy choices, hard life. At a high level, very, very high level, that is a theme you should keep in mind. And Seneca, just to harp a little bit more on the Greek philosophy aspect of this, and why I think Socrates is so interesting here, is because Socrates knew what the goal was right from the start. Socrates knew that all he wanted to do was stand out there by the Stoa and harass people. And so he did. That's what he did every day. The man was pretty wealthy and he was sharp, and he just spent time lecturing outside on the stairs. And he did that every day. There was no amount of money that could have convinced him not to. And so when they come back to him and say you were wrong, he's like, no, right? Seneca's big revelation at the end of, I can't remember which book off the top of my head, is that the goal of philosophy is to be okay with death. We're very far from electrical engineering at this point, but I will say that what I'm trying to convey here is that knowing what the goal is will help you be a far, far better engineer than any particular career talk or any TED talk or any clown who claims to be able to be the best engineer in the world or what have you. None of that is really going to help you determine what you decide that success is for yourself. And that is the challenge of being alive. I hope you don't let anyone convince you that there's anything different, right? Money certainly will not accomplish that, despite what you see on any of the random social networks. Although Bitcoin might, so you should buy some. That's not financial advice. So let me actually jump before I give you the thank you, because I think we do have a little bit more time. I want to show you a framework you could potentially apply, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I do, just to give you an idea of how to apply that diligence I was describing earlier for what you want to accomplish. Then we'll talk a little bit more about how you can rigorously categorize it. So this is my calendar. This looks like a piñata threw up, but what I want you to be aware of is a couple of things. One, I use Google Calendar religiously. My time is segmented out really heavily. I even schedule my weekly relationship powwow with my girlfriend. These things are super, super helpful because you can always move these reminders around. If I'm not able to make this thumbnail, I can move it to 2 days in the future. But the goal is to never drop the ball for anything in my life, ideally, right? Similar thing for me, I use Google Calendar for birthdays. So my friend Sandy, her birthday is this Sunday. I'm never going to forget that because you can use Google Calendar to template in those birthdays. So I use Google Contacts as a CRM for my life in many ways. So if I look, let me just pull up my friend here just because he's a good example. So I've got the birthday. Don't remember this address. Don't remember this phone number. His favorite chocolate is white chocolate coconut, and he also likes cookies and cream. And I have him in a couple Google Contacts groups. But now, if I'm ever out and I want to surprise him or do something nice for him, I have exactly what I need. I know exactly when his birthday is. For most of my friends, I will DoorDash a snack to their house on their birthday. That will, when it comes to your personal relationships, this allows you to scale the number of people you can keep in contact in your life to a much higher degree than you ever could just trying to remember things. I remember nothing personally. So this is a really powerful thing to keep in mind, that you can use software to scale the amount of leverage you have on your social relationships, which is really nice. And the other point I wanted to bring out and harp on here is how do you track the higher level goals? And so I'm going to show you two things. The first, my personal mission in life is to be a good man, not a great man. This does not have to be your mission. Remember, as far as you know, I am a blowhard. It does not matter what I think about any of these things. I'm only giving you an example for you to work off of. So I have, for me, my mission in life to be a good man, not a great man. And so I have particular virtues that I believe are important for me to seek to enable a world unafraid of complexity, whimsy, and virtue, right? And so I have this little sheet where I track my 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, and 15 year visions. My total score, for example, I'll compute this as a function of how well am I doing relative to my goals for the year. And I have it time adjusted as well, meaning I literally will have some Excel here that says, hey, how much of the year has passed? 14.5. I've accomplished 21% of my goals for the year so far, which means I'm actually doing great. And so how do you actually compute this? I'll show you some of my goals. So on the personal and professional side, I'm hoping to complete a legal internship this year. I'm hoping to beat the market as far as my personal investments. As an investor in GameStop, I was actually successful in doing this. But more importantly, there's the law school. I'm hoping to do EMT training, speaking at a couple of conferences. And this is actually a good opportunity for this because I've actually done this year. Earlier today, I spoke at Blockchain's Decentralized Conference. And so that's now 100%. And you see here how that 21 updated to a 29. Pretty cool. And this is what I'm showing you is a structured framework for outlining your goals called OKRs, objectives that are high-level objectives with a timeline. For example, we believe we shall go to the moon by the end of the decade, an objective with a time frame attached to it. Similar thing here. So for example, I'm taking an online comedy course. Like I said, I'm hilarious, allegedly. So I want to finish this course this year. I want to perform at 10 open mics when those hopefully open back up. Ideally, I want to get 8 hours of sleep every day. Not doing great at updating this particular one. Ideally, 3 workouts per week, supplements every day, meditate for 10 minutes a day, trying to become more proficient in Arabic. So I track the number of days I've done Duolingo. Be more satisfied with social relationships. These are a little more mushy, and I think that's a little too speculative for this discussion. But I'm also hoping to become a Class C chess player. There's a rating system for that built in. Personal development and education, right? Online books, courses, some number of that, traveling with friends for a vacation, successfully cooking 10 meals for myself, not doing a great job with that. But those are some examples of how you could think about what are your actual goals, right? What do you want to accomplish for the year? If your goals are literally just to, if your goals are literally just to finish your year of engineering school, but also to accomplish A, B, or C extracurriculars, right? Maybe Alex wants to get an additional publication out. That can be one of his OKRs for the year. So yeah, that is the basics, I think, for a lot of information I just threw at you guys. I can wholly appreciate that. But if this is valuable to you, or hopefully this is starting to kind of sink in, how you could apply an analytical framework to what you want to accomplish in your life, I think that kind of structure can make you much more effective over the long run, especially when collected with these ideas of compound interest. The more you invest in bettering yourself, the more that will compound over time throughout your life and will enable you to be more successful and probably rich, hopefully. I'm not rich, but maybe someday. That's the hope. So I'll leave my own goals. I think, oh no, I can't. I actually probably shouldn't do that. Fortunately, I have the sharing off, so it doesn't matter anyway. But I can't give you my goals, but if you like, I can give you an older version of my goal sheet so you can try doing something like this for yourself if that is interesting to you. So I'll take one more break for questions because like I said, I threw a bunch of knowledge at you guys, or what I think is knowledge. It might not be.
No, I mean, I think I want to say that was pretty awesome. More or less, like I think that was a super good, like all-encompassing look at kind of your journey and also at life. So I think I mean, I've implemented some of those things prior to this, but I think it's really cool to see somebody else's perspective and to kind of sort everything out and have this all-encompassing look. So I definitely very much appreciate you coming out to talk today.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, it's I think it's really, really hard actually. And it's one of those things that I think we always think, oh, like no one puts out a framework for how to do this, which was always kind of one of my big pet peeves. And if you have no framework for how to do it, it'll never occur to you like, oh, this is how you might try. And without that, you'll kind of live with less direction than you could have otherwise had, right? In a sense, what this chart is attempting to approximate is, the absolute value of that distance between me and the North Star, something like that. That's the hope for what this sheet is trying to accomplish. If you guys would like, I'm happy to share more things that I collect that I think could be useful. But we'll see if there are questions. I appreciate it, Brandon. Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. the silence isn't necessarily good, right? Like this is usually the reaction when I do stand up. So, I still got another 6 minutes to kill, and I am happy to stall.
How much time do you spend on setting all that up?
Oh God.
Because I noticed in the goal paperwork, you don't have like set up a goal for like 2022. Is that like a yearly thing you work on, or?
At the beginning of the year, oh, I should have mentioned this. Thank you for reminding me. I do something called a goals review every 2 weeks. So I'll show you guys that. It might be nice. It might be nice to see. So thank you for bringing that up. Let me go back to my desktop. And again, please don't remember any of these things. I'm a pretty open guy. I have no idea what information you're seeing. So every 2 weeks, I have this recurring calendar event to do my goals evaluation. And what this essentially is I'm going to go open all of these Google Docs, right? And I'm going to go and open my New Year's resolutions, long-term Google Analytics, Google Search Console for myself, Twitter Analytics, YouTube Analytics, etc. I do all of it. And so I just look at these things every 2 weeks. That's really nice because sometimes you just have a tough 2 weeks. And we have that experience where somebody just stops going to the gym 3 weeks after January. And so what you want to do and what this is good for is it helps you remember like, oh, here's the things I'm really trying to evaluate. I actually don't really need to step through these, but some of the things that are good to do. Every year, I actually hand write a theme for the year and what my New Year's resolutions are. In this case, it's to stay on the path. I probably should have also added moving to a minimalistic wardrobe to this, but at the same time, it takes a lot of time at first to directly answer the question. It takes a lot of time at first, and it takes some consistent effort throughout the year, but not that much, right? And what's really nice about having these analytical goals is if you ever have a bad week and you feel like a failure, you just open your spreadsheet and you're like, oh, analytically, I'm not a failure. So this feeling is illogical, right? And then you just move on. That's a really fun feature of this as well. So, you can do a lot with Google Analytics and seeing how you're doing just with whatever your stuff is. So let's say, this number of Twitter impressions, whatever. Maybe this is a more vain and banal kind of metric to use, but yeah. So I think that's a really big thing. Looking at it every 2 weeks really will help you. Really will help you feel like you're actually staying on track for whatever it is you're trying to do with life. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah. If you have better ideas though, by all means, like tweet them to me or email me, whatever. I'd be very curious to see how, because you guys are all also very analytically minded and very likely smarter than me. So I'd be curious to hear how you guys do it. Let's see here, some questions in the chat. Since you have demonstrated an excruciatingly clear knowledge on the value of your time, it means a lot that you spend. Thank you. Yes, this is something actually you should be incredibly vicious with people getting time from you. I am notoriously difficult to actually schedule hanging out with. It is very hard for people to hang out with me. My God. But when I do commit, this is one thing. Your commitment should be gospel to you, and you should take it very personally if you let someone else down, especially because you've outsourced your brain to the cloud. And so there is no excuse for you to drop the ball on anything. That's how I personally think about it. So if I drop the ball or I miss a meeting or something like that, I take that really hard. I feel really bad about that for quite a while, especially because it's really easy here. Like I can get the birthday message out in 30 seconds. I personally, you want to do something a little more interesting for your friends than just the text that says happy birthday. I record a video message pretending I'm a radio host and play some Spotify in the background into the voice message. That tends to speak out a lot more when it comes to actually retaining that engagement with the people you care about. Next question. If you had the opportunity to come back in time and change something, what would it be and why? I have a banal answer to this as well. I would go back to 2011 and buy Bitcoin, or depending on how far I can go back, I would go and determine, there's a couple of fundamental questions about life that people like to ask, right? What is the meaning of life? That's a hard question. What religion is correct? These kinds of things are very hard to measure. Like many of the big questions, the answers are similarly big. They're up to you to decide. So I think the thing I would want to do, the reason I want to buy Bitcoin is really, it's not about the Bitcoin. The money is meaningless. It's more about the freedom, right? So right now we all presumably will work jobs for the foreseeable future, right? I hope to run a venture fund and invest in startups in the Middle East, and even that is a job, right? But it comes back out to what is beyond the money, right? I think what's interesting, the most interesting thing to ask someone is I like to ask people, what's the dream and why? And what's beyond that, right? This concept of what's the dream encapsulates, if you had the money to do whatever you want, deciding what you do from that point is much harder than what you will do if you don't have money. Because if you don't have money, you'll look for a job, intuitive enough. So what you do if you have it is a bit of a harder question. So I think the why for being rich, not just for the freedom, but also because I'll use it to hire a bunch of tutors and then hire a bunch of people to build a bunch of companies, I think should exist. As a random idea, maybe one of you guys can build. I keep pitching this. I think it's very weird that we can get in a stranger's car to get a ride and we can go to a stranger's house to stay there overnight, but we don't have some sort of an Uber for playing games in person with people. Like, I should be able to pay $1 and get a prompt that says, go buy 4 pool noodles and go to this playground. 5 people will be waiting there for you that were also free at this particular time. You're going to play kickball or whatever it's going to be. That seems like one of the ways to rebuild the kind of community gap that has been developing over time. And that's not, I don't want to get into too much social commentary here, but I think it's very strange that we don't have the ability to really make connections in our local communities. And that's not, it's not anyone's fault. It's just the nature of how software isolates us, even though we're right next to each other. So yeah, or I could hire, my friends. Yes, good move, Carlos. That's why you want to keep the video birthday messages up, because if you, that one time that you make that call, as far as how lobbyists think of it, you know, a lot of the technology lobbyists I've talked to describe it as like, you want to make sure that that engagement is high so that the one time you need something and you call them, they pick up the phone. Similar thing with your friends as well. Oh, in Japan, there are friends for rent. That is unfortunate. So, okay, I'm not going to read these chat comments anymore. This is not, yeah, so those things I think are really cool to keep in mind. There's a lot of different kind of ideas for startups that could come out of talking to you guys and seeing what you think is important. But that's just a random thing that I think is interesting. And so I'd hire a bunch of people to create a bunch of other things like that that are probably cool. Any other questions? I know I am tough on time, but at least for today, I don't have too much to do after this. So if you guys have other questions or things you're curious about, I'm more than happy to answer. Or if there were any resources I shared that you guys didn't get, actually, I think Carlos has the slides, but I'll inject the link into the chat as well for them.
Oh, did you say, I probably missed it, but did you say, what do you want to do after law school?
I think the hope is to do a mix of technology, policy, and venture capital. That's the dream for me at this point. One of the most underappreciated combinations is a law degree plus an engineering background is exceedingly rare. You can see that even at the highest levels of the courts, where you'll see, for example, Oracle v. Google, and these people are going up there and they don't actually have an understanding of what the Java runtime is. And so you wonder, like, what kinds of IP lawyers are these? The answer is the best ones you can buy, but not the best ones to argue these kinds of cases. You're never going to be able to properly establish and make a meaningful case for negligence on Oracle's part or what have you, or negligence on Google's part to respect a certain patent, resulting in conversion or something like that. You can't really make that case if you don't understand what it is that Oracle has patented and how Google uses it in the open source Android runtime. So that's a bit of an interesting opportunity. I think if you're looking for really interesting career paths and you're not entirely sure about engineering, maybe think about law school, although law school is incredibly overpriced right now. So I could give you a whole other lecture on why I go to the particular law school I do. But that's that's a bit of a crazy one.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, David, I had a quick question for you.
Yeah, sure.
So if you get caught in a rut in life, right, what would be the first steps you would take to get out of that, and how would you go about doing it?
Yeah, as someone currently invested in Bitcoin, I completely feel this because that could go to zero tomorrow. So I think Naval's, if you all don't know Naval Ravikant, I highly recommend reading his book, The Navalmanac. It's made by a product manager at, I'm forgetting where, but his name is Eric Jorgensen. Really great book. So one of the things that's interesting about what Naval describes for how to build wealth over time is that it's more about the education you give yourself. Naval gives this hypothetical where if you dropped him in the middle of London with nothing, he would probably eventually become rich wealthy again, relatively quickly. And I think his reasoning there is that if you invest on learning on your own and you just make some good strategic decisions as far as risk management and those things, you can set yourself up really well. But that's not to say that luck is not a factor in life. And so all you can do is, from an analytical perspective, do the best you can to reduce your risk exposure. It depends on how conservative you want to be. You know, you never go skydiving, you avoid certain types of contact. So, you know, I'm super crazy with this. I purposely drive a terrible car for a lot of reasons, but one of the most important ones is that it doesn't garner attention. I purposely wear uninteresting clothes because if I wear things that are more interesting, you're more likely to stand out in a crowd. If you're going to get randomly harangued with bad luck by someone who's having a bad day or what have you, you know, the less interesting you are, the better. But also on the other side of it, not needing, I think something that leads a lot of people to ruin is a fundamental misunderstanding about what brings value at the personal level, which is why it's good to build this kind of a document, because in many cases, not needing a thing is as good as having it. So for example, I have a bunch of friends. I'm 26 how old am I? I'm 26.6919688. So there's a lot of things I do and don't need in my life. A lot of my friends are talking about getting really expensive houses and really nice cars. Those nice houses and nice cars are handcuffs to your desk for the next 10 years to 20 years or what have you. So I think a lot of that bad luck comes from needing, I shouldn't say bad luck comes from needing those things, but you can be in a worse position by thinking you need or want things that you actually don't. Living beneath your means and focusing on how you can better yourself tends to be a good way to compound wealth over time. And I think people I know who've ended up in bad situations that stuck with principles that were solid and were patient and ran with them for long periods of time tended to be really successful in the long term. So that's my best answer. Obviously, you know, luck is luck, and I could never claim to have any kind of fix for that. And I could also never claim that, you know, there's any way to necessarily get yourself out of those kind of situations. It's really tough. So yeah, charity is good. You know, be charitable when you can. That's another nice piece of it. I have a pet project of whether there's a way to use a cryptocurrency to incentivize people helping homeless people, but I haven't come up with a good idea on it yet. Haven't cracked the case, but I think there might be something to that. We will see. Any other questions? Alex, feel free to cut me off if I'm talking too much. I have a bad habit of that.
No, we love to see it.
Cool. I will take that silence to mean that my that I was somewhat successful, maybe. I don't know. But if you guys want to reach out to me in any way, you're more than welcome to look at any of these resources. Just tweet at me online. I try to be pretty active. I've been having a lot of fun with that lately. So by all means, feel free to reach out to me if there's anything, either with questions or you're trying to get resume reviews, or you have a company you want to pitch or something like that. I'm more than happy to help you. You could reach out to me 5 years from now. I call people from high school 10 years later and just to say hello. So, you know, don't be afraid to do that. At the end of the day, I don't know anyone who's ever reached out to me or anyone I've ever reached out to that got angry at me for doing so. So yeah, you know, call some friends, feel free to treat me as a friend or what have you. And just once again, thank you to Alex. Thank you to Ruth for setting this up. Thank you to all of you guys for hearing me out. And yeah, I think this was good. Hopefully you guys got something out of it.
I just,
thank you, David.
you mind if I say something super quick, Alex?
Yeah, go ahead, dude.
Yeah, I know that when you're giving like a presentation in front of a bunch of people, especially like college students who are so used to just sitting and listening, it can be a little discouraging, but Dude, this is probably one of the best general body meetings we've had with a speaker. I'm not gonna lie, man. Like you've really given a lot of helpful and useful information. It's been really interesting too. So I just kind of want to reinforce that and let you know that it was outstanding. So thank you for your
appreciate it.
time, man.
Yes, no,
appreciate it.
Truthfully.
Yeah, that's good to hear. It's tough because I don't know. I personally I had to really figure a lot of this out on my own. Like any information, you collect a lot of it. Read often. There's another piece. Like I'll spend 6 or 7 hours just reading. And for a fun fact, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett do not work together. They work in completely different areas, and they read for 10 hours a day or whatever it is. Then they get together, and Warren says, "What if we do this?" And Charlie says no, because A, B, or C. And that's what happens pretty much every day at Berkshire. And that's all they do. So do not feel like you're wasting time if you are reading. Currently, I have about 40 Chrome tabs open. I've been really investigating the decentralized finance space because you can currently put up crypto in these collateralized loans. This is, I could talk about this forever, but there's really, really fascinating things happening in the decentralized finance space. And as one last tip, I suspect if you are able to pick the right cryptocurrencies now, there is a vast fortune to be gained over the next 10 to 20 years, especially as we see some interesting things happening with commodities and changes in inflation rates across a couple of different countries, and the Ethereum ecosystem slowly building, like token after token for, Uniswap and DAI are really, really interesting projects. And seeing how China is trying to create parallel versions of these with the Binance Smart Chain is really fascinating. So there's a fun thing for additional homework to look into if you're a finance nerd. The rates are like 40% APR in DYDX right now. So I'm going to be messing with MetaMask today after this to see if I can capture that.
Did you happen to have any crypto suggestions?
Let's be clear about a couple things, gentlemen. I'm an idiot. So anything I say to you is not financial or legal advice. No client relationship is formed whatsoever. But I think that Ethereum and DAI are, well, DAI is a stable coin that's really interesting to me, but Ethereum is very interesting to me. Uniswap, Maker. I have some Filecoin because I believe that's the future of the decentralized internet. And Algorand, I also am invested in. Just for
How about a new cipher?
I don't know. I don't
No.
know about crypto. There's so many of them, and I'm just catching up. I'm just kind of catching up to this space, so it's tough. I don't know much about new cipher, unfortunately. I wish I did.
All right, thank you.
Cool. All right. If there's other questions or anything like that, I guess I think you said you guys have a podcast or something, so maybe that could be fun to do as well. Who knows? I can't invite myself onto the podcast. Sorry, actually. But if there's other questions, I'm happy to come back or answer. Like I said, you can find me on Twitter and the various. I'll throw the Twitter in here too. I'll probably be most responsive there. And note that may change to just David Awad, depending on whether I'm able to get that patent and trademark in Andorra, and then I will sue Twitter and get that handle changed to just David Awad. I'm very serious about the branding. You got to be. So we will see how much money I'm willing to waste on that project. All right, now I'm talking too much. We're 13 minutes past. So thank you again, Alex. If you have any closing statements or anything.
Yeah, I mean, again, I do want to thank you for coming out. I know we kind of had some scheduling conflicts early on here, but I'm very happy that we were able to fit this in. Again, to echo what Lucas said, this was a really cool presentation, and I was honestly like wired the whole time listening. It was pretty good, like comically, and also with the aspects of advice I thought they were very valuable. So thank you for stopping by.
I appreciate it. Yeah, the comedy is a fun one to have.
It's coming along.
Yeah, there's another one. There's a huge market for people who can tell jokes that can program. That's exceedingly rare. So if you're able to do that, certainly think about it. They laughed at me when they said I wanted to become a comedian, and they're not laughing now.